Hey all my digitally twisted outlaws. How you guys doing today? So I'm super excited to talk about the graphic novel today that I'm going to talk about. I'm sure you can see down below in the title, I'm going to be talking about the graphic novel, The Legend of Wonder Woman Origins. Now this is a really, really thick book. When it was published as individual comics, there was 27 issues spanning in 2015 and 2016. So this is quite long. I've read it a few times, and every time I've read it, it's taken me a couple hours to read, and I also usually get very teared up. It's quite the tearjerker. Dave's always like, "Are you okay? What's the matter?" And I'm like, "No, it's just really touching." I really, really love this graphic novel. Look, I'm getting teared up just talking about it. I think this is probably one of the best graphic novels I've ever read in my life. It's very powerful writing. It has really amazing themes to it. And I think that this is just a really good example of a very strong female character that's done the right way. And granted, this was written back about, 5 years ago, before I feel like a lot of our current Mary Sue SJW stuff started infiltrating the comic book industry. And it's such a good depiction of a female character. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Here's the cover of it, The Legend of Wonder Woman, Volume 1, Origins. Actually, the one I have is just Origins, I think because this is a compilation of everything. And it is written by Renae De Liz, and it's illustrated by Ray Dillon. I will say I wasn't really too fond of the illustrations right off the bat. I feel like they're a little bit childish, almost in a way. I would have definitely like to see something, I don't know, just with a little bit more of like sex appeal, I guess. It kind of reminds me of like, when you see those little kid geared comics at the comic book store. But, it doesn't matter because once you get into it, like the story just really speaks for itself, and Wonder Woman is such a captivating character. So there's three real main themes with this comic that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is going to be about motherly love. The second one is going to be about kind of a purpose and path-finding journey that Wonder Woman is on. And the third one is just going to be, a good example of really strong, positive female friendships, which I don't feel like is something that you see a lot of times in the media. And this particular comic just resonates that so well. And I don't know if it's because this is set in a different time than what we have now, but the friendship between Diana and between Ida is just so great, and it's not something that you see every day, but it's something that I think more females should try to aspire to with their relationships with other females. So you need to know a little bit of the backstory of kind of the origins of Diana, Wonder Woman, when we get into it. And this comic actually starts out talking a lot about Diana's mother. Her mother, Hippolyta, she was the queen of the Amazons. When the Amazons kind of first came into being, and they were warriors that were working for, Zeus, Poseidon, Ares, all of them, in those real ancient battles that are talked about in Greek mythology, they were eventually granted their immortality and put in charge of the Mascara, and Hippolyta was kind of positioned as being queen. Well, this is not something that she was happy with, because she knew that along with her immortality came the fact that she would never be able to bear a child, because the immortals were not allowed to have children. On the Mascara, every 6 years, the gods would grant the mortal women that lived there, they would grant random women a child that they could raise. But the immortal goddesses that were in charge of taking care of this island, they were exempt for that, and they were not allowed to ever have children. And this really almost brought around the downfall of Hippolyta and her society for a while there, when she tried to leave her post as goddess because she wanted to have a child so bad. This is something that she prayed for hundreds, thousands of years. She tried to plead with the gods that, she wanted to have a child. She tried to escape from her position to mate with a mortal man in order to have a child, and it just wasn't working. And over time, she became more and more and more filled with grief. And this is a real thing, and I think that this really highlights for a lot of women, mortal women in the world today, a struggle that a lot of them go through as well with trying to conceive children, and that a lot of times it's a lot harder than people think it is. But I digress. Hippolyta, this is the one thing that she wants so much, where she feels like her life has just been lacking. This queen of this great society, she feels like her life is not full because she doesn't have a child. And one day, she runs away in her sorrow. Thousands of years of hollow existence echoed inside of her, and it pushed her to run until she could no longer stand it. So acute was her sorrow at this moment that the gods could feel it high on Olympus, and yet they turned away. For in their pettiness, they would not allow the laws of immortality to be broken. However, and this part is very, very important, this takes place at the very beginning of this big graphic novel. But this is so significant to Diana's path, and where she ends up going and how she becomes Wonder Woman. Because in this moment of Hippolyta being just so filled with sorrow at the fact that she's not able to bear a child, it says that from somewhere ancient and forgotten, her pain was heard, and from the clays of the Misera and the hope of Hippolyta's mind, her gift was sculpted. And there is little baby Diana, rising out of the clays of the Misera. Hippolyta finally has her child that she's able to raise. And yes, Diana is immortal. She's not an immortal. She's not a goddess. She's not anything special. She's just a regular mortal child that was birthed out of the clays of the island that the Amazons live on. So this part right here, we start getting into Diana's childhood. And this part's, again, very significant for that path that's laid in front of Diana and how she finds her purpose. So this is Diana right here. She's the one who's just looking out the window, not paying attention to anything going on in class. And their teacher is basically talking to them about that one day that many of them are going to be called to take their place in one of the 12 temples of the gods. She talks about how she was called to teach for the house of Demeter, and that the classes are held in her garden, but that other kids may be called to study the stars for Apollo, or to learn combat and guard the walls. This little girl right here is saying that she's going to be a mother someday because Artemis told her so. This little girl is saying that she's going to be a priestess of Poseidon. And they're all talking about what they feel like they're being called to do. So one of the kids turns to Diana, and they're all like, oh, well, we all know what you're going to do, Diana. You're going to be the queen because your mother's the queen. But no, that's not necessarily true, because she's not an immortal. She's immortal like everybody else. And this little girl points out, no, she cannot. Only immortals can rule. It's the law of Zeus. She's immortal like the rest of us. Whereas, and the other kids are like, that's cruel. And Diana's not even really paying attention to this, though, because she's just staring out the window, focusing on the island, and all of her concern is focused on the fact that there's something wrong with the island. See, Diana, she's able to feel that there's this sickness that's growing within the island, this darkness that's overtaking it. And she feels like, this is her purpose, this is her duty, that she has to be the one to stand there and save her people and save her island, save her home, protect them. This is not something that her mother wants. Her mother is very much against this. Whenever she talks to her mother about, "Mother, can't you feel it? There's something wrong with the island," her mother just doesn't want to hear any of it and just wants her to learn how to be queen. She wants her to, study the histories, learn all of the different languages, learn all the traditions of the queen, and how she can someday rule the people. But Diana's constantly pointing out to her, "Mother, I'm immortal. I can't be queen." And her mother is convinced, no, you're going to petition the gods. They're going to make you immortal. They're going to put you as a queen. Because Hippolyta, the thing she's most scared about is losing this child that she longed for so long for. She spent millennia longing to have this child, and then finally to have it be granted, have her happiness finally put in front of her, to realize that her child is immortal and someday she will grow old and she will die and Hippolyta won't, and she's going to be left with that emptiness again. And of course she doesn't want that. She wants Diana to petition the gods to become immortal, to follow in her mother's footsteps and have them be together, forever. So one day, Diana, fed up with her mom wanting her to, do her lessons, she runs away. She runs outside of the gates of their city, out into the wilderness, because she wants to see more of the island. And while she's out there, she encounters Alcippe. I think her name is said Alcippe. I'm not really sure how to say a lot of these names, but we'll say Alcippe, who is the woman that basically trains all of the all of the little girls who are basically guided to be guards for the city. She's the one who trains them. So she's kind of like the great warrior sage of the Amazons, and she's also an immortal. She has been friends with Hippolyta for a very long time, since they've been immortal together, and she really looks up to her. And she does not want to see Diana get injured, get hurt, die, have something horrible befall on her, because she knows how much that would break Hippolyta's heart, who's her best friend. So Diana tries to petition Alcippe to train her. She's like, I have to learn to protect my people. This is my destiny. She says, that she will do anything to guard her mother and her homeland from whatever danger is infecting the Misera. The very island yearns for protection, and she feels that it's her duty to become strong enough to help save it, and she has to learn how to do this. Which this is very interesting because of the fact that, I had a slide a couple slides back, which showed all the kids talking about what they're being called to do, all of the different gods that they feel called to serve. And, Diana's not really feeling called to serve any particular god, but instead she's feeling called to serve the island as a whole. To protect the island from this darkness that's growing in it, to protect her people. And if we think about it, she wasn't granted to a mortal being by the gods. She was arisen from the clays of the Misera. And she was basically arisen from Gaia, who Gaia is a very, very ancient goddess. One of the goddesses even before many of the gods like Zeus and Poseidon and Ares and Hades and all of them came into being. Gaia was the original spark that created the planet. So Gaia is the clays of the earth itself, and that's where Diana was created out of. So Diana is really being called to serve an even greater force, Gaia, to protect the whole, as of now, she thinks she's just being called to protect the Misera, but really she's being called to be the protector of the entire planet. This is a scene that takes place at the very end, but it really illustrates very well, that Gaia is talking about how she came to be and how the planet came to be, and that in an attempt to flee, the light split into countless pieces, and in each arose beings to continue the purpose of creation. And that's how she came to be. She's one of the few ancient creators who remain and has many different names. And it's true because there are many, many, many different cultures that have different names for the goddess, which is the earth, which is that spark of life, of creation, where everything stems from. And she says, countless worlds have risen to my touch, but one by one, they have all fallen to darkness. Earth is her last remaining creation. And in humanity, she's placed the remainder of her power, her life, and her hope. And Diana is the manifestation of that. And she will become the protector of that. So again, it goes back to this, you know, all of these other kids that are being called to serve these different gods and goddesses. And you know, I think at first Diana is very uncertain about what her path is because she's not being called to serve one of these 12 temples of the gods that their whole culture is based around. She's being called to serve something that's much bigger and more ancient and a much broader scale. And this causes her a lot of conflict because she doesn't know which path or which purpose she's going to follow, you know? She's on a completely different trajectory than all of these other children that are being raised in her society. And it even does cause a little bit of strife with her mom, since her mom wants her to follow in her footsteps and doesn't want to lose her. But that's just not Diana's destiny, you know? And Gaia is telling her that it was she who felt Hippolyta's pain, and that she was the truest and had been the greatest servant for the Misera, and she felt the deep pain, and she felt the fact that the gods continuously turned away from her, even though she was a loyal servant to them, and that it was Gaia who, you know, granted Diana into this world. She says, "It was I who felt your mother's pain, she who is truest of all people. I am life, I am earth, I am the very clays of the Misera. I gifted Hippolyta with the last spark of life in my power to shape the hopes of her mind, creating a child, you. Inside you survives the power of light. This power is born to you and awaits the moment for you to take it. Only a choice, pure of love for the world, could awaken your power." So what's interesting, during this graphic novel, Diana goes on really quite the journey of finding who she is and what her purpose is. So she ends up becoming the champion of her people in Amazonia on the Misera. And what that means is ever so often they choose a champion of the people through basically a fight, like a combative fight, and whoever wins is deemed to be the champion. Well, in the past, the champion who's been chosen has always been Hippolyta, but Diana ends up becoming the champion after she enters into the competition undercover. And the reason why they needed a champion is because as Diana was, sorry, I'm being attacked by a hare. As Diana was out one day in the wilderness outside the gates of her city doing her training, this ship crashed, a plane crashed, and there was a man, a human man from outside of the world. Well, they've been taught in their society that there's nothing that exists outside of the Misera, that all of the rest of the earth was destroyed, humankind was destroyed, they're the last that remains, and nobody lives out there. So the fact that this man from outside of the island crashed was like, oh my gosh, maybe there is something else that remains. And Diana had been feeling for a while that this sickness that was invading the Misera was creeping in from outside of their boundaries, that there was something going on in the outside world and it was infecting their island. And the fact that this man, his name is Steve, the fact that he crashed on their island she was like, oh, maybe there is something more. And she felt it was kind of her duty to protect him and keep him safe. Well, this ended up being a plot of Ares, and Ares, what's the word I'm looking for? The high priestess for Ares had basically kind of started this plot that she was going to bring this man in here and they were going to use it to start this big campaign against Hippolyta to cause her downfall. There's a lot that goes on in here. But anyways, they decide that they are going to choose a champion, and the champion will get to decide what's going to happen to this man. Whether he's going to be killed, whether he's going to be saved. And since Diana felt it was her purpose to protect this man, she entered undercover in this competition, and all of her years of training with Alcipe had paid off, and she wins the competition. It becomes the champion of her people. And she decides, no, I want to take this man outside of our borders. I want to send him back to his world and leave the Misera and let him go free. And as she does that, kind of the wheels of fate are set into motion, and she ends up getting stranded in our humankind earthbound realm outside of the Misera, and she cannot get back to her homeland. Well, when she's in the human world now, it's in the midst of a giant war, World War II, and there's all this fighting going on. I mean, you guys know what was going on. And also, if you've seen the Wonder Woman movie that came out a few years ago, it kind of follows along with those same plot lines of she gets there and there's all this fighting and she realizes, like, oh my gosh, this is where the sickness stems from. Look at all these poor people suffering. Where's their champion? Who's protecting them? And she decides that, she needs to kind of stand in that world as well as the champion for the people. There's also a whole nother subplot that goes on with this Duke of Deception, who she sees talked about in kind of a tabloid newspaper. But the Duke of Deception was wearing this gem that her mother usually wears. And she's like, oh my gosh, if he's wearing this gem, that means something happened to my mother. I need to find him, and I need to find out how he got this gem to find out what happened to my mother. So this is kind of how she gets embroiled in it. There's a lot of stuff going on. But let me get back to kind of the theme here, which is basically how she kind of finds her purpose, And it's saying she had to live the truth of the world as a mortal in order to know the darkness and the light of humanity. Only then could she decide basically what she was going to do. And that she was born of light and hope and the clays of the earth. And despite the darkness of the world, that she continues to choose to love it and to protect it. And that she's become a beacon of truth in the darkness. And this is how she ends up becoming Wonder Woman. And it's really only through these experiences that she has as a mortal that she's even able to make these decisions and to kind of see the path laid in front of her. Hippolyta reflects before she leaves, once she becomes the champion of the people and decides that she wants to leave with the mortal man to take him back to his world. Hippolyta kind of reflects on this, that, her entire existence, that she waited for Diana, and that when she finally had her, she became blinded by the fear of losing her. And now she is a grown woman, and she can make her own decisions. And she realizes that it was wrong to ask her to just kind of blindly become an immortal and to become a queen if that's not really her choice. I mean, Hippolyta, it wasn't even really her choice to become an immortal, and I feel it's something that she very much regretted her whole life. And although she did finally get the child that she so desired, look at all of the years that she spent longing for it. And so they do have this moment of kind of reconciliation before Diana leaves. And that's very important for Diana, just in realizing kind of like what her roots are. And her first cause is that she feels that she's champion of her people and of her mother, protector of her people and her mother, but then once she goes out into the mortal world, she sees all the suffering there and realizes that she wants to be the champion and the protector of all the people in all of the world, not just on the island of the Masera. Another area of this comic that I think is really, really amazing is the relationship that develops between Diana and this woman. Her name is Ida Candy. She's the lead singer of this band called the Holiday Girls. I'm willing to bet that they probably have their own little like subsect spin-off of comics, probably Ida Candy and the Holiday Girls, because man, they are like a really crazy bunch. But they have such a great friendship, and this is something that you rarely see, and it's really Ida's presence in Diana's life as mortal when she's trapped on our earthbound planet that really helps to push her in this direction of feeling like she can make a difference in the mortal world. You know, Diana's very, very lost once she gets here. When she crash lands here and she wakes up, she's immediately like, I need to get back. I need to find a ship. I need to find my way, but I don't know anything. She's very much out of the culture and just lost. I mean, it's a completely foreign world to her. And she stumbles upon this frat sorority party that's going on. It kind of makes a spectacle of herself, but just out of nowhere, Ida jumps in and defends her and kind of rescues her from the situation of everybody standing there staring at her, wondering where she's come from. Ida jumps in and is like, oh yeah, no problem. Oh, this is my cousin. Oh, cuz, come on, I didn't know you were here. And kind of like takes her off to the side and helps to shelter her and protect her. Gives her a place to stay. Gives her food to eat. Helps to educate her about the world. Gives her clothing. When Diana sees in the tabloid paper about the Duke of Deception and she's like, hey, I gotta get to where this Duke of Deception is. And Ida's like, well, that's like over in Europe and there's a war going on. I don't think you want to go there. And Diana's like dead set on, no, I gotta go there. And she finds out that she can volunteer as a nurse in order to get overseas and be closer to those people so she can find out the Duke of Deception. Ida, who's barely knows this woman, you know, they've known each other maybe like a few weeks by now, she volunteers to go along with her. So she hops on a ship, goes over to a war-torn zone with Diana, and she's like, that's cool, I'll volunteer to do singing over there. Like, Ida is such a good example of a friend. It's just really amazing. And these two have a really great friendship that blossoms. On Diana's first day, where she works in the nursing ward, it's really hard for her. And you have to remember, you know, she was brought up on this island that is full of immortals, some mortals, but there's no war. It's very peaceful. And although she is trained in the combative arts and they do have a big warrior culture there, there's not a lot of fighting. It's peaceful. So she's never really seen this amount of physical suffering that people have inflicted upon each other. So her first day working in the nursing ward is really, really hard on her. Just to see how deep this, as she calls it, this sickness and this darkness has infiltrated the world. It really hurts her heart, as she says. So she comes home from her first day, tending to all of these soldiers with horrific injuries. And, you know, she's just, you know, she just wants to chill. And she's talking to Ida when she comes back. And Ida has a big show that night. It's going to be her first show over here in the war zone, singing to the troops. And basically, you know, Diana comes home. She's saying, the suffering of your people I witnessed today, it injures my heart. And Ida's like, your people, my people, we're all in this together, aren't we? Ida doesn't really know a lot about where Diana comes from yet. And she hasn't really questioned it. She's kind of like, you know what, it's fine. You don't have to tell me if you don't feel comfortable. That's cool. I'll just support you. So, you know, she's a little bit confused, but that's besides the point. she tells her, hey, why don't you just stay in tonight and relax? You know, I got a new book that you can read. I think you'll like it. And you can have some of those chocolates I bought. But Diana says, you know, would my presence be of help to you tonight? And Ida says, of course. And Diana's like, no, I'm going to come then. And it's like, this is that really great friendship where they're both helping to support each other. And it's a very beautiful thing, you know, and especially like Ida doesn't know a lot about Diana. She kind of just jumped in out of the blue. She obviously is very much concerned with her own fame and her appearance, but takes Diana under her wing as like, hey, you know, you're like my fellow sister, and I'm gonna help you to be successful as well. And Diana also reciprocates that, which this is a big step for Diana. Because once she comes into the mortal world, although she cares about people as a whole and their suffering as a whole, it's very hard for her to make connections with people individually because she feels like she's so out of place. And the fact that she really has allowed Ida to become so close to her, and that she recognizes that, you know, Ida also needs support and friendship as well, and she wants to be there and reciprocate those feelings. This is a big growth point for Diana to just develop her character in more of like a one-on-one human, mortal type of, you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say, essence, I guess. So after Diana goes out and fights her first night, she kind of like, she sees that the Duke of Deception is, you know, laying this plan, and she goes out there to fight him. She brings all of her accoutrements, which I'm going to get into in a minute, because I think that's a really interesting point to make. But she comes back, and Ida has been sitting up all night long, waiting for her to come back to tell her, hey, you know what? I've been really patient with you. I have not questioned all of these crazy things you've been saying. I went with you across the Atlantic Ocean to a war-torn area. I haven't questioned any of your crazy stuff up until now. But you know what? You flying out the window, coming back all covered in blood, this is the last straw. I want you to tell me what's going on, who you really are, what all this is about. So Diana, she does. She tells her about it. And Ida's like, you know what? Maybe you're crazy. Whatever. Who am I to judge? But I'm just going to take what you say at face value. And hey, let's do this. Let's reconstruct your image and let's make you into Wonder Woman. And Ida, who's really into fashion and fashion design and clothing, she is the one who really constructs Diana's signature look as Wonder Woman. They go through a few different iterations of it, which you'll have to read the book to see, but they ultimately settle on kind of her secret identity of Wonder Woman. And right here, this is what we see as Wonder Woman. And what's really cool, all of these things, all of these gold pieces that we see on Wonder Woman, these are items that have been gifted to Diana from her mother, which I'm going to get into in a minute. Her mother gave her these items before she set out on her journey to bring Steve back to the mortal realm, and they're all magically imbued. But this flag right here, which makes up her costume, this was given to her by a woman that rescued her. When Diana first crashed on her way bringing Steve back, when the ship that she was in first crashed, it was this fisherwoman and her husband that rescued Diana and kind of like nursed her back to health. And they're, you know, older woman, probably in her 60s or whatever, and her husband, and they live kind of out there on a harbor. The husband, I think he does crabbing, not fishing, but whatever. And she tells Diana, she's like, you know, I really see this like strength in you, and it reminds me a lot of my son. Actually, no, not her son, her grandson. It reminds me a lot of my grandson, and he wanted nothing more than to become a soldier in order to protect people. And he went off and fought in the war, and he got killed. And here's this flag that I had stitched for him by hand that I was going to give him when he returned home. But he never returned home. But I want you to have it. I don't care what you do with it. I just feel like you should take this with you. So she's been carrying this around with her as a memento from this woman, and this is what Ida ends up using to make Wonder Woman's costume, which is very cool. And people interviewing Wonder Woman as she's showing up in all of the, news stories, saving these troops, defeating the Duke of Deception. People are asking her, why are you wearing the American flag? Are you part of the United States? Are you working for them? And her response, again, it really sums up to me that feeling that she has of, this is my purpose. This is my path in life. And she says she wears it to symbolize freedom and strength of spirit. She doesn't stand just for America, but she stands for all who have good and truth in their hearts. And this just really wonderfully encompasses who Wonder Woman is, who Diana is, and, what she's doing, and this path that she's found herself set on. So these are the items that are given to her by her mother. And what I think is so cool about this is, Wonder Woman, she has a lot of powers. She's definitely on par with, Superman as being one of the strongest superhero characters in the DC universe. But these items that were given to her by her mother were the source of her power, at least originally, until she ends up being granted the powers from Gaia. Originally, she's just a normal mortal. Yeah, she's done training with the Amazons and she knows how to fight, but she's still a mortal. She's not a Mary Sue. She doesn't just have all of these amazing powers out of nowhere. Her mother, the immortal, queen of the Amazons, has collected these different items throughout her lifetime. She says the armlets are from Artemis and they're impenetrable and superior to any shield. The armbands of Wonder Woman that she can block bullets with. The chest plate is made by Hephaestus. It's one of the strongest of his creations, and it's guarded Hippolyta's life on more than one occasion, so a really strong breastplate. The tiara was Athena's and will build on the strengths of your mind and help you to see further and react faster. The boots are from Hermes, and they give the wearer the ability to glide on strong winds. There's also, I didn't put this page in here, but when we go to the next page, so she also has the girdle, which was made by Zeus, and the famous lasso, which Wonder Woman uses, actually, this one right here, Hippolyta made this herself by shaving small little slivers off of the girdle and then weaving them into this lasso. And she says what this lasso is supposed to do is it basically illuminates any area in which there's darkness. And these were basically the items that were granted to Diana when she goes out on her journey by her mother. And this is the source of her power, is these items. It's not anything supernatural. Although after Diana displeases Zeus, because Zeus wants Diana to decide to become immortal and to be Zeus's champion, in which case he will make her immortal, but the payoff is that she will ultimately end up having to allow the earth to be destroyed so that it can start over again. And Diana's like, no, I can't do that because I'm the protector of this world. I am standing in between those who want to destroy this world and the world. And I will not take your offer of immortality and the offer of all of these great powers if it's going to result in the earth being destroyed. So he strips all of her items of their power, but not the rope, because the rope wasn't created by Zeus or by the gods. It was endowed, it was basically empowered by the hopes of her mother. And it was created by her mother, and it was a wish for truth and light in the world, and that's a power that the gods cannot take away. So even though her other items were stripped of their power when she denied Zeus's request, her lasso still retained its power because that came from something much deeper. That came from the hope and love and light of her mother, and that was something that the gods could not take away from her. Once she finally agrees, though, to Gaia's proposal, so Gaia says, you know, this is why I created you. You have all of my last remaining bit of hope and light for humanity, and this is why you've been placed here. And Diana basically says that she does understand, and that she's been lost many times, and that there's been many different paths that have been laid before her. Queen of her people, champion of the gods, but none of them felt right to her. And really, honestly, not even living as a normal mortal felt right to her. And she kind of regrets that, because she does love her friends that she's made in the mortal realm, but she knows that the path that she has been seeking her entire life is this one, and that she will stand between the light and the darkness, and that she will protect life and good on earth, and that to that task she will, you know, belong, and she will accept her immortality, but it's the immortality that's being granted by Gaia, by that original spark of creation. So once she agrees to this, Gaia grants her all of the powers that we, you know, now see as Wonder Woman, and allow her to be effective in standing between light and darkness and protecting the life on Earth. I think this is just such an amazingly beautiful story. I love it so much. I've gotten choked up a lot just talking about it today, and it's really powerful. I really, really urge, you know, you guys to read it. It's really stellar writing, something that I don't read a lot nowadays in comics, but I wish I did. It's beautiful, and thank you guys for listening to all of this. I'm sure I've been rambling on for quite some time, and if you stuck it through to the end, thank you for staying here. I look forward to talking to you all again later. Let me know in the comments down below which comics you want me to read and talk about, or what your thoughts are about Wonder Woman. If you've read this one, if you've read other Wonder Womans, which you think were equally as good. And yeah, I look forward to reading them all. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye!